Damn it, Preston!
Bonjour mes amis, bienvenue en Avignon, en France. Welcome to Avignon. Today is day 17 of my amazing adventure in this charming town. And I did happen to get outside of the old city. I went wandering today, and funny enough, I managed to, or I realized that I hadn't really spent a lot of time outside the walls. So today I wanted to research a bus route, and so I figured at the same time I would go on a little walk and check out a new part of the town, but also a part that included outside of the town, or outside the walls rather. It's kind of interesting. Outside the walls, you guys, I feel very vulnerable and unprotected. No, I don't like this feeling at all. I gotta go back. Yeah. Whew. Phew. Feels so much better. The sun's shining now. Feel protected and embraced. Yeah. These walls work. Yeah. And so, yeah, researching bus routes, I had to really, or had an opportunity to try a lot of my French today. And between the market, I found a new deli, and this bus thing, I spoke a lot of French today. And I was complimented on it again. And a few people are mentioning it in messages to me and comments here and there, which I really appreciate. But I gotta come clean. Yeah, my French is okay. And I'm doing well for someone who was never really taught French. But I was in French immersion, which means my primary language in grade school, primary school, was French. Everything was in French. In fact, I didn't even learn English in school until the second grade. And then by grade 8, we were expected to be as good in both languages. And so for me to fumble around and not be able to speak French is a little shocking. I know I haven't used it in 30 years, which in and of itself, even saying the word, it's been 30 years is tough to say, but I haven't, more than 30 years in fact, if I'm being honest. So I just never use it, and I've kind of lost it. And on the one hand, I'm amazed how much it's come back and how I can conjure words out of thin air. But at the same time, it's also really bad for someone who spent basically 11 years learning French, and yeah, it's a weird thing because sometimes I think I'm doing really well. And other times it's ugh. And it's so funny because it brings me back to those days. I hated the fact that I was in French. I hated learning French. And part of the reason was because my friends were in English and I wanted to be in English class. But the main reason why I couldn't stand it was it was so traumatizing learning it. I mean, I'm only half exaggerating, quite frankly, because it really so the last couple of years, with this trip and the trip last year, I was playing with Duolingo, and I was learning Italian for a while. And then when I decided I would come to Spain, I figured I'd switch over to Spanish. And I realized while I was, trying to learn, I was getting upset sometimes, really upset, more than you need to get upset. When I would get things wrong or things just wouldn't make sense, or, I made a joke one time that You know, basically, if you were to take a day learning a language, what they would say is, okay, we're going to take about 10 minutes and we're going to tell you the rules of the language. And then the rest of the day, we have to talk about all the exceptions. And it's like, well, what's the point if there's so many exceptions, you know? So I would get frustrated with this. Like, that's not what you said, though. This is, and I don't understand why I was getting upset at this phone, you know, telling me I was wrong. Because it's like, that's part of the learning process, right? You know, they try something, you get it wrong, they say, yeah, no, this is the right way. Try it again, you know. But I was getting upset. Like, I was really like, you know, and I found myself like getting in bad moods and stuff. And then realizing it was like, oh my God, this is what it is. I'm back learning languages again. And I hate it. And the thing is, like, I like it. Like, I like languages. I find them fascinating now as an adult. Because they are fascinating, right? Like learning why something's called something, you know, learning about the evolution of language, and English in particular is a frustrating language for anyone who's it's not their primary language, especially the spelling. We're the only people who have spelling bees, by the way. Nobody else does that. Anyway. It's really fascinating, especially, like I said, like learning Latin derivatives, Greek derivatives, like understanding why the language is the way it is, and, you know, why we call things the way we call them. And, you know, our language is a jumble of, you know, the Latin languages, some Germanic languages, and some Scandinavian and that. And so it's fascinating. But they don't teach you that in school. That's not what they teach you. They don't teach you why something's called something. They just tell you this is what it is. And it's very arbitrary, it seems like, you know, and I never liked that style. Of course, as a child, you don't really like, not only do you have no control over that, but you also you can't articulate it. You can't figure it out. So it just comes out as like, I don't want to do this. I don't like it, right? But the worst part was the stupid feminine and masculine articles and pronouns and everything. And I got to tell you, that was traumatizing. That whole part of it, and that word triggering. That's how I describe what it's like when I was learning Italian again and getting upset because, you know, something's masculine or something's feminine, and why is that even a thing? Like, who cares? It's so unimportant. And so, yeah, it was triggering. Like I felt like I felt way back then, just in this, like, you know, this feeling that it doesn't matter what you're going to do, you're going to get it wrong, right? You could conjugate the verb right. You can figure out, you know, like I had math in French, right? So I could be sitting there, you know, learning the multiplication tables, and I'm figuring it out, and I'm communicating in French, and in the middle of it, it's like, you know, la table. It's like, what? La table. Yeah, but, you know, 9 times 5, it's 45, right? Yeah, not important. You didn't say le right. It's like, what? Okay, sure. Le table, la table. I think it's la table. Le table? I don't know. But that's the culture, right? And that's what I mean. Like, there's this culture of pedantry when it comes to it, right? Where it's perfectly okay for anyone in any situation, no matter what the circumstance is, what you're doing, how important what you're saying is, what you're saying. It's okay to just interrupt and say, oh, I'm going to correct what you know, your masculine and feminines. And it's like, what? You know, like the joke I make is that if you were like in an emergency situation and you're like, oh my God, call the ambulance. This man's dying. They'd be like, la ambulance. It's like, what? Okay, call them. Yeah, no, say it. La ambulance. Call la ambulance, please. It's like, you know, and it is a culture. Like anyone out there who's watching this who has taken French in school is probably nodding along with me, going, "Yeah, that is so annoying." And I've heard so many stories too of people in the workplace. Like way back when I used to work in the government too, and I would hear people like just start correcting each other in French. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, first off, it's not important. It's not at all. But secondly, like, can we like, you know, focus on what we're doing here? You know, maybe correct them afterwards or send them a message later. Like, you know, anyway, you can tell I'm getting upset now, right? Like, you know, because it is, like, I think about it and I was just like, you know, when I was a kid, you know, you're young, you can't figure these things out, right? You don't know how to articulate it, but like, you know, and like I said, while trying to learn so many things, you just get interrupted on, you know, these insignificant points, right? And I think that's where they lost me all the time, was it was like, okay, fine, you know. But the worst part is, I know I keep saying the worst part, but the worst part is, it seems like it's arbitrary, right? You know, a car is masculine, a flower is feminine. I don't think that's true, actually. I think that's the opposite. And like a building is a woman. Like, who cares? Right? It doesn't, you know. Anyway, like I said, I'm upset. Already thinking about it. So when I started learning Italian and found out that, you know, you had to conjugate everything, right? It sent me down the spiral of like, oh, I hate this. I hate this language. I hate learning languages, you know, which was a shame, right? But here's an interesting thing. I found out just recently, like within the last 2 years, that if something is if something is female in Italian, it is also a female in French. And that holds true in Spanish as well, for the most part. And so I was like, oh, well, at least if I know what it is in French, then I can figure it out in Italian. But therein lies the challenge. I don't know it in French. I don't at all. It's like, okay, well, that's not helpful. But I found out that in Italian, they do have rules to it. There's, of course, exceptions. But generally speaking, if it ends with an A, it's feminine. If it ends with an O, masculine. If it ends with an I, it's masculine plural. Ends with an E, feminine plural. Now, there are, like I said, a bunch of exceptions. Il problema, for example. And there's also words that just end in E that are singular, and a bunch of other stuff that frustrates me, and you know, whatever. But that's a great general rule, great rule of thumb. And so now, in a weird bit of irony, as I'm speaking in France, in Avignon, and I have to say the table, I don't try to conjure back the memory from wherever, you know, back in the 5th grade, you know, sitting in the back of the class hoping not to have to speak, because you know it doesn't matter whether or not you get the answer right, you still have to make sure that it's masculine or feminine, and who cares? You know, none of that. So what I do is I think of what it is in Italian, il tavola, or la tavola, excuse me. See, already, don't care. La tavola. Oh, la table, right? Feminine in Italian, feminine in French. And you know how many times that's helped me out? Like, it's limited to how much Italian I know. But yeah, I'm still learning, I'm still trying, still doing the Duolingo every day, and I'm still having like little moments of like, you know, grade 5 fits of like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is stupid. Because it is. The good side of it is that I have been able to communicate. I have been able to talk, and people have complimented it. So, or complimented my French. So, I don't think they know that I, you know, was in French immersion and I spent my childhood learning French. And they don't need to know because, you know, they just think I'm trying and they're helping me out as best as possible. And not one person since I've been in Avignon has corrected my pronouns at least. That's good. So maybe it's just a Canadian thing. No. So there will be another pastry tomorrow. There'll be another video tomorrow, in fact. So with that, in my perfect French, I will say, à demain, au revoir. I'll see everyone tomorrow.